The Republic of South Africa narrowly averted a military coup by soldiers loyal to former President Jacob Zuma, on the eve of his forced resignation in February 2018. Highly placed sources within the security forces and RNC leadership told City Press that military intelligence picked up on talk of a revolt among soldiers who were former members of the RNC's Umkhonto we's way. President Cyril Ramaphosa, then RNC President and Deputy Head of State, was warned to resolve the standoff with Jacob Zuma because it was likely to cause instability if it dragged on. The army chiefs were also wary that Jacob Zuma's popularity among his former Umkhonto we's way comrades was being exploited to mobilize sympathy among the forces. Senior military leaders played down the threat this week, saying the top brass would not have tolerated a mutiny, that they were above petty party politics, and the idea of keeping Jacob Zuma in power by force did not even arise. They insisted the army was loyal to the constitution, and that the chief of the army, General Soli Shoki, had continuously championed this. When Cyril Ramaphosa spoke of a bloodless leadership change at an army event in Kimberley 4 days after his inauguration, it was in contrast to the situation in Zimbabwe, said one military commander. South African National Defence Force insiders said, ANC elements who wanted to advance their factional interests were trying to use the military as a proxy in their political battles, but it would not succeed. The idea is that if you weaken the security forces and especially the army, you have weakened government, said another. Fringe groups such as the MK Nkululeko Foundation, which was one of Jacob Zuma's fiercest defenders, had launched a hands-off Jacob Zuma campaign, and spoke of a civil war if Jacob Zuma was not allowed to complete his term, and remain in office until next year's general election. Jacob Zuma also enjoyed significant support in the Umkhonto we's way Military Veterans Association, which comprises the RNC's former liberation soldiers. However, Jacob Zuma's lieutenants said he was the hero because his decision to resign saved Cyril Ramaphosa the embarrassment of being rejected by the military. Remember, Cyril is just a civilian, so the military would not recognize him in the same way as Jacob Zuma, said a close aide. So it was agreed that Jacob Zuma would resign, so that it could send a message to the army, as well as Amabuto Zulu Army in KwaZulu-Natal, to indicate that there was no need for a revolt. But Amabutu was still willing to fight. One Jacob Zuma lieutenant warned that Cyril Ramaphosa was again meddling in the affairs of very powerful people in the security cluster through his appointment of a high-level review panel on the state security agency, which could spell similar trouble for him. Those guys will not be happy to have him suddenly saying he is revetting them and all those things, and they could bring down his government, he said. Cyril Ramaphosa allies confirmed the military threat, but added that generals loyal to Jacob Zuma tried to push the agenda, but were defied by the rank and file. Our constitution saved us from that crisis, said a Luchuli House insider. The military, almost all generals, did not support the recall. When Jacob Zuma rose to power, he changed the entire army hierarchy, and placed many loyal soldiers in it. A senior member of the RNC alliance said that, aside from a military revolt, they also learned that Jacob Zuma intended to fire Cyril Ramaphosa as deputy president in a snap cabinet reshuffle as part of his fight-back plan. The alliance insider confirmed meetings with army officials, adding that the state security agency was also lobbied to revolt, but all plots were foiled. However, Jacob Zuma's allies mentioned former Security Agency Director General Arthur Fraser as one of those who worked behind the scenes to prevent the crisis. A member of the RNC National Executive Committee said that there had been talks about the army revolt. At the time, there was also a lot of misinformation, but, yes, Jacob Zuma had wanted to fight through the army as commander-in-chief. He said Jacob Zuma should also be credited with having the wisdom to see it would not work out, after which he ended up hanging up his gloves. An RNC MP said they had heard that Jacob Zuma was planning to declare a state of emergency and cordon off the parliamentary precinct and arrest MPs on the day he gave an exclusive interview to the SABC. Apparently, this plan was foiled when the generals below the army chief indicated their loyalty to the constitution, the MP said. But the army brass said the state of emergency claims were a lie. Jacob Zuma sympathizers said his statement that some people may fight during his interview hours before he stepped down was based on nothing but the fact that he enjoyed a lot of grassroots support and that he wanted to travel the country with Cyril Ramaphosa to forge NC unity. On February the 18th, 4 days after Jacob Zuma resigned, Cyril Ramaphosa went to Kimberley, where he thanked soldiers for a bloodless leadership change. Brigadier General Marfim Gobozi yesterday said allegations of interference in political leadership were baseless. As per the constitutional mandate, the SRNDF is not in the business of interfering in the political developments of the Republic, he said, and added that the SRNDF pledged allegiance to the Constitution and took direction from government, irrespective of who was in charge. Jake Isilias, a senior researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, said he believed the problem with the army was not politicization, but rather indiscipline. I don't consider the SRNDF was factionally aligned or some type of threat to Cyril Ramaphosa, but it is certainly in need of a comprehensive overhaul, he said. Isilias said it was inevitable that the inclusion of politically aligned former Liberation Army soldiers into the SRNDF would bring some political baggage. He added that Jacob Zuma appointed according to loyalty, not competence throughout the security cluster, including the SRNDF. Military analyst Helmut Heitmann said there was some politicization in the SRNDF, and probably more of it in the Army than in the Air Force or Navy, but I do not think it is at a level where I would consider it a threat to the Constitution or the democratic order. I get the impression that, by and large, the officer corps is deeply unimpressed with all politicians, regardless of any former affiliations. Most officers who entered the SRNDF, from whom Konto sees way in the Azanian People's Liberation Army, seem to have long since shaken off their past politicization, and do not let their political beliefs get in the way of their duties. I am not at all convinced that the current senior leadership are all fans of our former president, or would step outside the bounds of the Constitution. And even if some of them might want to do that, I believe that they would find it very difficult to get any real support from within the Defense Force, Heitmann said. Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe.